Well, happy. Okay, happy's relative, right? If it's fulfilling, if it's rewarding. 'Cause I also believe in putting yourself in an uncomfortable position.
You think you know the Brad Pitt story? The whole epic tale? For decades, he's been more than a movie star. He's been a permanent fixture in our cultural consciousness. His romances weren't just relationships, they were global events. We all followed the golden era of Brad and Jen, a Hollywood dream come true. We watched the earth-shattering arrival of Brangelina. And we've seen the reunion since, the subtle glances and friendly waves that sent the internet into a full-blown meltdown. We thought we knew every chapter, but what if the biggest twist, the most important confession, is the one that hasn't been spoken aloud? Until now. Imagine this. It's April 2025. Brad Pitt is giving a quiet, reflective interview about his latest film. The conversation turns to his past, to roads not taken. He pauses, looks away from the camera, and with a gravity that seems to hold decades of unspoken feeling, he says 7 words that would set the world on fire. She was the love of my life. In that imaginary moment, the internet wouldn't just break, it would shatter. Because with those 7 words, Brad Pitt would rewrite his own history. He'd confirm what millions have always hoped and suspected. This isn't just a celebrity story. It's an exploration of a truth that could take a lifetime to tell. A story of love, loss, and why that fantasy still holds us all completely captivated. To understand why a confession like that would be so monumental, we have to go back, to a time that feels simpler now, the late 1990s. This was when Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston weren't just 2 stars, they were an idea. The living, breathing embodiment of a Hollywood fairy tale. Their story started in 1994, not with a lightning bolt, but in a quiet, everyday Hollywood way. Their managers were friends. At the time, their hearts were elsewhere. Jen was with actor Tate Donovan, and Brad was in a very public relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow. Their first meeting was friendly, but that's about it. Jennifer later called him just a sweet guy from Missouri, a normal guy who didn't seem weighed down by his own fame. But 4 years later, in 1998, their agents played matchmaker and set them up on an actual date. This time it was different. The timing was perfect. What was once a casual acquaintance bloomed into a full-blown romance, one they kept secret for as long as they could, hiding from the paparazzi to let it grow on its own terms. Then came September 12th, 1999. The Emmy Awards. That was the night. They stepped into the spotlight together, making their official red carpet debut. The pictures from that night are legendary. The 90s glamour, the sun-kissed hair, and the unmistakable look of 2 people who were completely crazy about each other. Hollywood had its new king and queen. Things moved fast from there. Just 2 months later, they took the stage at a Sting concert in New York, where Jennifer flashed a brand new diamond ring and they announced their engagement to a roaring crowd. The message was loud and clear. This was the real deal. Their wedding, on July 29, 2000, was the stuff of legends. A lavish $1 million ceremony on a Malibu estate with a view of the Pacific. It was kept intensely private, but the details that leaked out painted a picture of pure romance. 50,000 flowers, a gospel choir, and fireworks. It was the wedding of the decade, cementing their status as the ultimate power couple. For the next 5 years, they were on top of the world. Brad was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, and Jennifer was America's sweetheart, starring in the ratings juggernaut Friends. Their marriage seemed like a little island of normal in a sea of fame. Brad even made a now iconic guest appearance on Friends in 2001, hilariously playing a character who despised Rachel Green, a playful wink to their real-life love that fans adored. To the world, their life looked like a perfect, sun-drenched dream. It was beautiful, aspirational, and seemed absolutely unbreakable. But behind the perfect photos and charming interviews, a different story was starting to take shape. one that would lead to a confession far more immediate and far more painful than the one we imagined 2 decades later. The fairy tale, as everyone saw it, was perfect. But as the years went on, the first cracks started to show, not because of outside pressure, but from a change within Brad himself. This chapter wasn't about a scandal. It was about a moment of brutal, gut-wrenching honesty that would set the stage for their eventual split. Years later, in a 2011 interview with Parade magazine, Brad offered a shocking look into how he felt during his marriage to Aniston. He talked about the 90s as a time when he felt lost. "I spent years f***ing off," he said, describing a feeling of personal stagnation. Then he dropped the line that sent shockwaves through the media. "I think that my marriage to Jennifer Aniston had something to do with it. Trying to pretend the marriage was something that it wasn't." The backlash was instant. The world had bought the fairy tale, and here was the prince saying it was a lie. Pitt quickly had to walk it back, saying his words were misinterpreted. He clarified that Jen wasn't the one who was dull. He had become dull to himself. "Jen is an incredibly giving, loving, and hilarious woman who remains my friend," he stated. "The point I was trying to make is not that Jen was dull, but that I was becoming dull to myself, and that I am responsible for." While that clarification came years later, it revealed his mindset during the final years of their marriage. He was restless, searching for something to shake up his life. This internal struggle led him straight to the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 2004, where he was paired with Angelina Jolie, an actress known for her intensity and edgy lifestyle, the complete opposite of the comfortable life he had with Jen. Their on-screen chemistry was so obvious that rumors of an affair started almost immediately. For months, both Pitt and Jolie denied that anything romantic happened on set. But the truth was more complicated. It wasn't about a physical affair during the marriage, but an emotional one. And it ended with a devastating confession from Brad to Jennifer. According to multiple reports, Brad was honest with Jennifer about his feelings before they ever announced their separation. He confessed that while filming, he had fallen for his co-star. It wasn't a confession of cheating in the traditional sense, but of a heart that had been captured by someone else. You can only imagine how devastating that conversation must have been, to hear from your husband that he's in love with another woman. It wasn't a secret she discovered in a tabloid. It was a truth delivered straight from his mouth. In an interview years later, Aniston would say, "I will love Brad for the rest of my life. He's a fantastic man," but also acknowledged that his sensitivity chip was sometimes missing, a subtle nod to the pain his honesty had caused. This first confession was the real beginning of the end. It shattered the illusion of their perfect life from the inside out. The fairy tale was over, and then came Angelina Jolie. Brad's confession of his feelings for Angelina Jolie was a private earthquake, but what came next was a public tsunami. The era of Brangelina wasn't just a new relationship. It was a cultural phenomenon that would dominate the headlines for more than a decade, forever casting Angelina as the other woman and Jen as the scorned wife. In January 2005, Brad and Jen announced their separation. Their joint statement was carefully crafted to try and control the narrative. "We would like to announce that after 7 years together we have decided to formally separate," it read, insisting the decision was made with much thoughtful consideration, and not because of any of the speculation reported by the tabloid media, but just weeks later, that carefully crafted story was blown apart. Photos emerged of Brad on a beach in Kenya with Angelina Jolie and her young son, Maddox. They looked like a ready-made family. For the public, and surely for Jennifer Aniston, these pictures were all the confirmation they needed. Aniston later admitted her shock, saying, "The world was shocked, and I was shocked. It was one thing to hear about feelings, but another to see them splashed across every magazine cover." And just like that, the era of Brangelina was born. They became the most famous, most followed, most photographed couple on the planet. Their life was a whirlwind of exotic locations, humanitarian missions, and a rapidly growing rainbow family. They adopted their daughter Zahara from Ethiopia, had their first biological child, Shiloh, in Namibia, adopted their son Pax from Vietnam, and then had twins, Knox and Vivienne, in 2008. Brad seemed to have found the exciting life he'd been looking for. He gushed about Brangelina, and in that same 2011 Parade interview, he talked about being a satisfied man now. "I'm satisfied with making real choices and finding the woman I love, Angie, and building a family that I love so much," he said. Whether he meant it to or not, it sounded like a direct shot at his previous life. Throughout all this, Jennifer Aniston became a sympathetic figure, America's sweetheart picking up the pieces. She handled the intense scrutiny with incredible grace, focusing on her career and refusing to get pulled into a public feud. But the Lonely Jen narrative stuck to her for years, proof of how deeply invested the public was in her original love story. Even when Brangelina finally married at their French estate in 2014, the ghost of Jennifer Aniston was always there. Their relationship was born from the ashes of his first marriage, a fact that could never be erased. The Brangelina storm was powerful and all-consuming, a life filled with passion, purpose, and 6 children. It was the life he chose. But as we now imagine from that bombshell 2025 confession, even in the middle of that whirlwind, the memory of his first great love was never really gone. It was just lying, in wait for the storm to finally pass. While the Brangelina storm dominated the headlines, Jennifer Aniston was quietly and gracefully building a life of her own. The years after the split weren't about wallowing, they were about rediscovering herself, both personally and professionally. She and Brad walked separate paths that, against all odds, would eventually start to lead back toward each other. Jennifer threw herself into her work, starring in hit films like The Breakup, Marley and Me, and Horrible Bosses, while also taking on critically acclaimed dramatic roles in films like Cake. She was proving she was a Hollywood force in her own right. Her personal life moved on, too. In 2011, she started dating actor Justin Theroux. Their relationship was much more private and grounded than her time with Brad. They got engaged in 2012 and married in a surprise ceremony at their Bel Air home in August 2015. It seemed Jennifer had finally found her own happy ending, far away from the Brangelina spotlight. Meanwhile, Brad's life with Brangelina continued its high-profile trajectory. They finally tied the knot in 2014 after a decade together, making their epic romance official. But just like his first marriage, trouble was brewing beneath the surface. In September 2016, the world was stunned when Angelina Jolie filed for divorce. The split was messy and explosive, leading to a bitter years-long custody battle over their children. The Brangelina fairy tale didn't just end, it imploded. In the aftermath, a more reflective Brad Pitt began to emerge. He was open about his struggles with alcohol and his path to sobriety. It was during this time of self-reflection that he reportedly reached out to Jennifer to make amends for the pain their divorce had caused. It was said to be a deeply emotional exchange that allowed old wounds to finally start healing. Jennifer, who was going through her own heartbreak after she and Justin Theroux announced their separation in early 2018, was reportedly moved by his apology. Slowly, they began to rebuild a friendship, starting with texts and quiet phone calls. Then, in February 2019, the public got its first clue that things had changed. Brad Pitt was photographed attending Jennifer Aniston's 50th birthday party. The internet went into a frenzy. Their separate lives, which had run on such different tracks, were finally starting to reconnect. Both had loved, married, and lost again. They were older, wiser, and humbled by the public implosion of their second marriages. This new friendship wasn't about getting back together, but about finding peace with someone who was an undeniable part of their past. The long road had, against all odds, led them back to each other, not as lovers, but as friends. But for the millions who never gave up, the stage was set for a public reunion that would give them all hope. The quiet rebuilding of their friendship was one thing, but on the night of January 19th, 2020, at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the fan fantasy of a Brad and Jen reunion crashed into reality. It was a huge night for both of them. Jennifer won for her role in The Morning Show, and Brad won for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The first viral moment happened during Brad's acceptance speech. He joked about his character being a guy who gets high, takes his shirt off, and doesn't get on with his wife. The camera cut straight to Jennifer, who watched from the audience, smiling and clapping with genuine affection. But the real magic happened backstage. As Jennifer was being interviewed, a photographer captured Brad stopping everything to watch her on a monitor, a look of pure adoration on his face. He was reportedly overheard saying, "Oh, wow," and then came the photo that broke the internet. As Jen walked past, Brad gently grabbed her wrist, and she turned back to him. For a split second, they shared a look filled with warmth, history, and an unspoken connection. The images went nuclear. To hopeful fans, it was more than just two exes being friendly. It was proof that their bond was still there, a whisper of a second chance. In the years since, sources have consistently said they are just good friends. They even participated in a virtual table read of Fast Times at Ridgemont High in September 2020, where they shared a flirty scene that once again fueled speculation. But the SAG Awards reunion remains the key moment. It showed two people who had survived a public inferno and came out the other side with grace and real affection for each other. It wasn't the dramatic romance of their youth, but something quieter and deeper. That backstage moment wasn't about getting back together. It was about acknowledging their history and celebrating each other. It was a beautiful chapter, but it laid the groundwork for the bombshell confession that fans are still waiting for. Brad Pitt's romantic life is a tangled and fascinating web. To understand the true weight of our imagined 2025 confession, you have to look at the other significant women in his life, particularly his first fiancée, Gwyneth Paltrow, and his current partner, Inez de Ramon. Before Jen, there was Gwyneth. They met on the set of C7 in 1994 and became one of the 90s most iconic couples. She called it major love at first sight. They got engaged in 1996, but it didn't last, splitting up in 1997. Paltrow later said she was just too young and not ready. In the years since, they've developed a warm friendship, with Gwyneth calling him a great guy and having him on her podcast. Now, imagine this fascinating layer: Jennifer Aniston and Gwyneth Paltrow becoming friends. While not publicly confirmed, the idea of two of Brad's most famous exes bonding over their unique shared history is a compelling thought, a sort of Brad Pitt exes club built on maturity, not bitterness. Then there is Inez de Ramon, Brad's current partner. First linked in late 2022, their relationship seems to represent a much quieter, more stable chapter for him. Inez is a successful jewelry executive, not a Hollywood actress, and their relationship has been described as easy and peaceful. By early 2024, it was reported that Inez had moved in with Brad. Their connection is said to be very strong and committed. However, recent reports suggest one point of tension. Brad is reportedly hesitant to get married a third time after his difficult divorce from Brangelina. This is what makes his imagined confession about Jennifer so shocking. He wouldn't be a lonely man looking back with regret. He'd be a man in a seemingly happy, committed relationship. It forces you to ask, what would it mean? His relationship with Gwyneth was fiery, youthful romance. Brangelina was the passionate, life-altering storm that reshaped his world. Inez seems to be a peaceful harbor after years at sea. But Jennifer, it seems, represents home. A foundational love that, in this telling, set the standard for everything that came after. And so we arrive at the moment that changes everything, the fictional confession of April 2025. Imagine Brad in a long-form interview. The journalist asks a final, reflective question about his legacy, about the North Star that defined him. In this scene, Brad falls silent. The movie star facade melts away, replaced by something raw and real. When he finally speaks, his voice is quiet. "You know," he'd begin. "I've lived a lot of life. I've made choices. Some good, some I regret. For so many years I was running, searching, for the next thrill, the next version of myself. But when you get to a certain age, you stop running. You look back, honestly, and you see things clearly, for the first time." And then he'd say the 7 words that would echo around the globe. "She was the love of my life." He wouldn't need to say her name. The she could only be Jennifer Aniston. He'd explain it wasn't meant to cause drama, speaking of his love for his current partner, Inez, but it would be about a final, complete honesty. He'd describe his love for Jen as the love of his youth, a pure and simple love he didn't appreciate at the time because he was too busy searching for something to shake him up. He might even admit that leaving her was one of the biggest mistakes of his life. The fallout would be explosive. Brad and Jen would trend for days. It would reframe his entire life story. The Brangelina era would no longer look like his great, epic romance, but a passionate detour. The SAG Awards reunion would now be seen as a silent acknowledgement of this profound, unresolved truth. Jennifer Aniston's camp would likely remain silent. What could she say? Perhaps she'd feel vindicated or just a quiet peace hearing a truth she may have always known. This isn't a plea to get back together. It's a reckoning. It's Brad Pitt at 61 finally taking full ownership of his past. Not just the mistakes, but the beauty of what he had. It's the final acknowledgement that before he was a global icon and a father of 6, he was just a guy who found the love of his life and didn't realize it until it was too late. This story has captivated the world for decades, full of twists, turns, and a stunning imagined confession. What do you think? Is a confession like this a beautiful moment of honesty or unfair to everyone else in his life? Do you believe some loves are meant to define us, even if they don't last forever? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as fascinated by these stories as we are, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The story of Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston is more than just a Hollywood romance. It's become a modern epic about love, loss, and the long road to self-awareness. A confession like she was